Welcome back everybody. In today's video, I want to show you how you can turn your tube amplifier with an effects loop into a standalone power amp to use with a rack preamp, a modeler, or a standalone distortion pedal. Let's do it. So if you've got one of these things, they're heavy, but they smell good and they sound good, and you turn it around, there's kind of picks flying everywhere. You can see on this particular amp, there's an effects loop here, which you can engage or disengage. Some amps have that option for you, but basically if you want to just utilize the power amp section of your amplifier, plug your modeler or your rack preamp or your distortion pedal or whatever it is into the effects return of this. You are going to bypass the preamp section of your amplifier there and just use the glorious power amp to basically make your preamp louder and also contribute some kind of nice tonal qualities to it. So let's get into it. I'm going to be using this wonderful amplifier, the Cherrytone Molecular. This is what it looks like upside down. I did that well. And then over here, I've got a Mesa 2x12 and I have a Sennheiser E609 microphone. Let's start with a rack preamp. I'm going to be using my ADA MP1 preamp and running it into the effects return of the Molecular. Now the MP1 has a presence control, which is kind of just like a high treble knob, and the Molecular has a presence control as well, which actually functions in the power amp section. It's also got a control called girth to control the negative feedback. I'm not going to play around with that one in this video. And there's also a depth control. I kind of just think of the depth control as that low end thickness control and the presence on the amp as like the hair control. This is just such a glorious thing to do. You know, the ADA MP1 kind of does one thing really well, but it does it so. So just kind of playing around with the depth and the presence control. If your amplifier doesn't have those controls, it's kind of no biggie. You can probably compensate from the preamp, but if they do, it's just a kind of nice added extra to really dial in not only this kind of sound from the preamp and the power amp, but also tailor it to your cabinet. All right, let's hear it in some other applications now. Another popular application is using a modeler. I've got the Fractal FM3 at the moment. I'm actually going to show you guys the Atomica High model. I like that model so much that I had this amp made basically to copy the sound of the model. So you're going to hear the model of the preamp with a real world clone of the power amp. In this kind of case, this is probably the quickest and easiest way to get that amp in the room sound if that's something you're chasing. If you're inexperienced with modeling or you're not used to going direct, this is going to keep you really happy but give you all the flexibility of the modeler. For example, I can use scenes on the FM3, to turn various effects on and off and kind of automate everything. Here's the straight up sound, then we'll hear it boosted with some delay. That is absolutely glorious. As I said, if you still want that thump from a real cabinet, this is a great way to do it, especially if you've already got existing amps kicking around. Let's try it with a distortion pedal now. I'm using the Sinvertek N5 Plus, which is really kind of a fully featured preamp. There is a 3-band EQ, there are a bunch of toggle switches to change things like the pick attack and the mid-range voicing, and there's also master presence and resonance controls. I've got this on the vintage setting, which, if you saw my video with this pedal, kind of gives you like a kind of Fender tweed style thing going on. I mean, it's not a very like specific emulation of it, but it does have a very different feel to play than the kind of stock mode of this amp. I'll also play around with the depth and the presence controls on the amp just to show off how much that can shape the power amp response. At the moment, I've basically got the treble and mids cranked on the pedal with the gain backed off a little bit. Like I said, I'm on the vintage mode, just a little bit of gain. Let's hear it on one of the parallel modes on this PRS. Alrighty, now if I crank the presence control on the amp, well, by crank I mean move it from 0 to the middle, we get this. Kind of just opens it up the way you would expect a presence control to open it up. And let's add a little bit more depth. I kind of want the low end to get kind of flubby and saggy the way a tweed amp would. So I'm going to turn the gain up a little bit, and I just turn the depth up on the amp. We get this. Again, that's kind of a sound that I couldn't normally get with this particular amp. And I guess the use case of a pedal like this, you would put it on a pedal board as your main drive, but if you were doing fly dates or you were touring and you were always using the same backline every night, this would kind of be a nice compact solution that you could run into the effects return. You wouldn't have to deal with, a different preamp on the various backline amplifiers you get every night, like, dialing in a pedal for an AC30 versus a JCM 900, totally different things. If you can kind of bypass that factor and go straight to the power amp, then that's kind of what you want, right? I hope you all enjoyed the video. It's certainly something that is fun to play around with, whether you have a bunch of old rack preamps laying around, whether you've got a modeler that you'd like to try through a cabinet, or whether you've got a distortion pedal and you're wondering whether it'll work as a preamp pedal on a pedal board and potentially downsize your touring rig. Playing around with the effects return on your amp as well as the associated power amp controls on your amplifier are a whole lot of fun. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Is this something that you're doing or you're thinking of doing? Let me know, what amp are you using? How did you like the results? Were you successful? Did you not like it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you next time. Cheers.